everyone, I'm Major Garrett in Milwaukee. Welcome to a special edition of America Decides from the final day of the Republican National Convention. For those of you who have been with us all week, thank you. For those tuning in for the first time, welcome. Let me start here. Sometimes it's hard to understand in the moment how big the strokes of history are being written around us. So I just want to pause for a second and let's think about life in America starting Saturday evening Eastern Time. Assassination attempt on the presumptive Republican nominee and a former president of the United States, preceding the first National Party convention being held in this country for 8 years. We had none in 2020 because of COVID. When that presumptive nominee and the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, arrived here, it had an electrifying, possibly galvanizing and important emotional effect on the delegates here, which could do something about the future of this presidential campaign in terms of party unity. On that very Monday, before appearing here, former President Trump named the first millennial to a presidential ticket. And tonight, when former President Trump takes the stage behind me and says the words, "I accept your nomination for President of the United States," he will do something that has never happened before in the entire history of the Republican Party. He will say those words for 3 consecutive presidential cycles. Meanwhile, while all this has been going on here in Milwaukee, the fate of President Biden's own re-election campaign appears to be hanging ever more perilously in balance, teetering. And if I'm to be honest with you, based on all the reporting here at CBS News, it feels as if that presidential campaign could tip over at any time. Not immediately, but within the next 3 or 4 days. We still do not know. History is all around us. We have been engulfed in history all this week, and the country is absorbing that history. And we have brand new polling data to express just how the country has been reacting to this welter of events. And for that, these brand new numbers, which are really important, I want to bring in Anthony Salvanto, who joins us from our studios in New York. Anthony, take it away.
Hey there, Major. So it's simply this. Donald Trump will accept the Republican nomination tonight with his largest lead of the campaign over Joe Biden so far. This polling was done entirely after the tragic events of Saturday. So this is your latest. It is 52-47. Now, I want to put that in context in a couple of ways, Major. First, that is a shift, slight shift, but a shift nonetheless, from our numbers nationally in early July, number one. Number two, that 5 points, what does it mean in historical context, Major, since you were just talking about history? You have to go back 20 years to find the last time that a Republican nominee for president won the popular vote, and 30 years to find a Republican presidential candidate who won the national popular vote by as much more than 5 points. So that implies an electoral college advantage for sure, and that is important historically. And finally, let me just point out, Donald Trump maintains his lead in those battleground states, in those states that, at least going into this, we thought would be the closest. That's where we stand, Major.
And Anthony, I just want to drill down on something you said, but I want our audience to get a little bit more perspective on it. At no time in 2016 or 2020 was Donald Trump positioned as he is today, correct?
No, he was not. In 2020, Donald Trump trailed in poll after poll. Of course, he went on to lose the election, but Joe Biden led in state after state, Major. So that context is important, too. And I want to show you this because, like I said, this is post-assassination attempt. The impact of it is not large, right? You see 2/3 of people say it hasn't changed who they're considering voting for. However, for those who do say it's had some effect, it is net positive, more likely to consider Trump, again, for those who say it's had an effect. But let me also show you this, because I think it's important. We asked for each, for Joe Biden, for Donald Trump, has what they've said in the aftermath of Saturday's tragic events encouraged more unity in your view or more division? And a slight majority, but a majority, feel that Donald Trump has encouraged more unity. They say the same thing about President Biden, but they're registering some of that unity. You've seen that in the convention over the last couple of days. Voters are being receptive to that, Major.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you so very much. I want to bring in Caitlyn Hy Burns, who joins me here. Caitlyn, those are numbers that are of a kind we have not seen in this campaign. We did not see them in 2016. We didn't see them in 2020. Yes, Trump lost in 2020, but he narrowed the gap in the closing days of that campaign. And many battleground states were tighter than the polls suggested. My only point there is if Trump's ahead now, that has got to be startling news for Democrats.
Absolutely, and especially at a time where Republicans have just had 4 days of cheerleading around their presumptive nominee, who you mentioned will accept the nomination formally tonight. I was thinking, just 6 months ago, Donald Trump was still facing attacks from within his own party. Ron DeSantis was still challenging him for the nomination. Nikki Haley was still challenging him for the nomination. Republicans were trying to figure out their way forward, even though the inevitable would be that Donald Trump was leading there. Meanwhile, Democrats were all united around President Biden. In fact, they had structured the primaries to, make it so that he would not really have much of a challenge at all. The script has been completely flipped, and we saw kind of the completion of the Republican Party uniting around Donald Trump with that speech from Nikki Haley last night. And the nomination of Vance drawing that generational contrast last night, not only to the top of his own ticket, but to Biden at a time where yesterday he was diagnosed with COVID, has to literally sit out the campaign for a few days at least, while Donald Trump is going to take the stage, his supporters rallying behind him, but also they're hopeful, talking to lots of delegates here, that this kind of moment has the ability, if he can seize it, to reach out to those voters who may otherwise not have been inclined to him before.
At 26% in Anthony's poll that says might consider, open to.
And when you think about the margins in those battleground states.
Sure. Caitlyn, I want to play for you mentioning J.D. Vance, the Ohio Republican senator, now on the ticket. He appeared today earlier in Milwaukee talking about something that he thinks the conservative movement, the social conservative movement, ought to give to former President Trump. Let's take a quick listen.
Remember that this is a guy who delivered for social conservatives more than any president in my 39 years of life. I think he deserves a little bit of grace, and he deserves a little bit of trust, and I hope that we will all provide that to him. I certainly know that as his running mate, I will.
Caitlyn, you know the context of that as well as I do. That's about abortion in the plank and what the president does or doesn't do on that issue.
That was not anywhere mentioned last night or over the past 4 days. The conservative movement for a half century has been working to overturn Roe. Trump's big achievement, in their view, is the nomination of those 3 Supreme Court justices who did so. There has been no mention of that perceived giant achievement, decades in the making. And J.D. Vance especially, who has been supportive of federal limits on abortion access, who was opposed to the ballot measure.
Very hardline limits, yes.
Yes, and opposed to the ballot measure in his own state, is acknowledging, is kind of messaging to that group, saying he supports the ticket and Donald Trump's approach that this should be left to the states, but don't worry, trust us on this. That it's kind of the nod there to those social conservatives.
Caitlyn Hy Burns, as always, thank you so very much. I want to go now to the White House, where we can find Weijia Jiang, who can catch us up on what the effects are or aren't of President Biden's COVID diagnosis and the very state of his presidential campaign. Weij.
Well, Major, the president's doctor says that he is still experiencing mild symptoms, but he will continue to do the business of the American people as he isolates at his beach house in Delaware. But let's remember that the president on the campaign trail was supposed to be the response to his disastrous debate performance. It was supposed to be evidence for the American people that he had the stamina, the energy, the sharpness to do back-to-back events, to travel and crisscross the country and do interviews. And now all that has halted. Of course, it is a virus that has sidelined him, but for whatever the reason, this could not come at a worse time for President Biden as he tries to salvage his candidacy, because as we have been reporting and talking about here, it remains a massive question about his viability and about whether he stays in this race, especially as the campaign, the pressure campaign for him to leave continues to mount among House Democrats. In fact, we are just seeing a brand new letter from Congressman Jamie Raskin, who is an influential House Democrat, who wrote to President Biden on July 6th, we should say, and talked about how much the president loves this country. And because of that, he should think about stepping aside. He said there is no shame in taking a bow when your arm is tired, making a baseball reference, and saying that, you should caucus with the rest of your team, Mr. President. And I expect, Major, that the longer this goes on, the more we'll see these public calls for him to drop out, when in private they have already been happening for quite some time now. And so it's difficult to see the path forward for the president, but we need to be very, very clear that it is the president who is driving that boat or whatever vehicle you want to use. He is the one in charge. He is the one who will ultimately decide what happens to him, because he is the only one who can release the delegates that he earned in the primary. So until he gets to that decision, we just have to wait and see.
With the latest on COVID and the future of the Biden campaign, Weijia Jiang on the North Lawn of the White House. Thank you very much.
Is there anything that you would look to, you personally, not anybody else, not other pundits, not even perhaps family members, that you would look to say, if I see that, I will reevaluate?
If there had some medical condition that emerged, if the doctors came to me and said, you got this problem, that problem.
That was President Biden on BET, what his campaign is saying about the Democratic divide over the future of that very campaign. That's next right here on America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides from inside Fiserv Forum here at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. That place, Fiserv Forum, is beginning to fill up here as delegates and others get set to hear from former President Trump later this evening. You can expect a standing room only crowd. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris reacted today to J.D. Vance's speech from last night, and the vice president focused more on what Vance didn't say than what he did.
He did not talk about Project 2025, their 900-page blueprint for a second Trump term. He did not talk about it because their plans are extreme and they are divisive.
For more, I want to bring in Biden-Harris campaign senior spokesman Kevin Munoz. Kevin, good to see you. I know this has been a difficult week. It may be a difficult weekend ahead. And I know the campaign has said this over and over again, but say it one more time. Is the president dropping out of this race?
President Biden is our Democratic nominee. President Biden is going to win this November. And after watching some of the nights of the Republican National Convention this week, he is more motivated than ever. We had the architect of family separation on the convention stage last night. We had J.D. Vance talking about how he cares about working people while he shills for Peter Thiel on the convention stage last night. We are motivated, we are excited, and we are going to put in the work to win because we cannot afford Donald Trump ever to set foot in the Oval Office ever again.
I don't know, Kevin, if you saw the newest CBS polling numbers that show nationally President Trump 52, President Biden 47. As our Anthony Salvanto just told our audience, the largest lead former President Trump has had in this campaign. Your reaction?
Well, look, we look at a lot of polls. We do a lot of internal polling. We look at a lot of external polling. But we also look at the conversations that we're having with voters at events, at the doors, when we're knocking doors. We look at what our grassroots supporters, which is at historic levels for the campaign, are thinking about and what they are motivated by. And what we continue to see is the more we talk about Project 2025, the more we talk about how dangerous the Donald Trump agenda is for working people and for their rights, the better position we are to win. And that is why it is so important that everybody that rejects Trump's dangerous ideology comes to the table, figures it out, and understands that Joe Biden is our nominee.
Kevin, I want you to assess for our audience, because they read the web, they see all these stories. The majority leader, Chuck Schumer, puts out a very soft, not even non-denial that he told the president it's time to end the campaign. That Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader of the Democrats in the House, does more or less the same thing, another tepid non-denial. It feels as if the leadership within Congress on the Democratic side of the aisle is either telling or strongly suggesting the president to not only reevaluate, but reevaluate to a place that gets him to leave. How should people process all that?
I think you got to talk to your friends and families about the issues that they care most about when it comes to this election. What we continue to see every day at the Republican National Convention is a massive threat to the basic rights of every American in this country. We have no vision for the future, no opportunity to create jobs like the way Joe Biden has. And I think we have to continue to listen to the questions that the American people care about at the end of the night when they get home from work. Look, Joe Biden, he was in Vegas this week, obviously got cut a little bit short, but what he talked about was a vision for the future. Because what we continue to hear from our voters is that they want to hear about how we can continue the progress to lower costs, to create jobs, to protect our rights, because those are the fundamentals that matter to voters that have the most at stake this election.
Should Democrats take any cues from former President Obama, who was reported by the Washington Post this morning to have said, reevaluate and seriously reconsider?
I think it's really important that the American people continue to think about the choice in this election. Every single day, Donald Trump is showing us who he is. He wants to attack us. He wants to divide us. He has no vision for creating better economy for this country. He is not here for you. And that's what we have to do as a campaign. Cement the choice between a guy that is fighting for you, creating jobs in this country, and Donald Trump, who has no interest, no plan in doing anything that matters to the American people.
Kevin, because this is a persistent conversation among Democrats at this point where they're at least theoretically imagining an alternative to the president, whether that is true or not, or they should, let's show you some also brand new CBS poll numbers on the matchup. Hypothetical, let me put that in all capital letters, hypothetical between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Trump. The numbers, as people can see on the screen, 51% Donald Trump, 48% Kamala Harris, slightly better than the gap over President Biden. What does that mean to you, if anything?
Again, I think the most important thing that this campaign can and will do every single day in this campaign is remain focused on the reality on the ground. We don't live in hypotheticals. We don't live in blind sources on the Hill. We live in the fact that there are so many Americans that do not have the luxury of creating this hypothetical in their head. They need to figure out if they are going to vote for Joe Biden or not based on if they care about their rights, if they care about who's going to fight for their health care, and they're going to really need to think about this when it comes to the ballot box. And I think we have a really good story to tell there, Major.
Kevin, preview or pre-butt former President Trump's speech tonight?
I don't think we're going to hear any much of a vision from Donald Trump. What we're going to hear is some lies. We're going to hear him continue to traffic in some conspiracy theories. And we're going to hear, and this is most importantly, Major, no plan for the American people. We heard a little bit of this from J.D. Vance last night. He talks about he cares about the auto worker in Michigan. Well, why is he so interested in doing nothing to pass the PRO Act in Congress? Why is he so interested in repealing the Inflation Reduction Act, which was creating manufacturing jobs in Washington? I think what you're going to hear is more division, more hatred, and no plan for the working people of this country that deserve a president focused on them.
With the Biden-Harris campaign, Kevin Munoz, thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you.
As the list of top Democrats urging President Biden, or at least strongly suggesting for him to bow out of the race, well, that number keeps growing. We are hearing again in her own ways from Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker Emerita of the House. More on what role Pelosi has and may continue to play. That's next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides, coming to you from the Republican National Convention here in Milwaukee. Let's talk for a moment about Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Emerita of the House. She's not only a powerful voice in House Democratic circles, her influence spans the entire Democratic Party. And she's denying a report today that she told President Biden that she's pessimistic about his chances of defeating former President Trump this November. Her spokesperson released a statement that said, quote, "Sadly, the feeding frenzy from the press based on anonymous sources misrepresents any conversations the speaker may have had with the president, unquote. Here now for some analysis and maybe some updated information, Ashley Etienne. She is the former communications director for Vice President Kamala Harris and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And Ashley, great to see you. What are you hearing? And I know that changes hour to hour. Describe what you're hearing now.
Well, I mean, what I'm hearing is that I checked in with the campaign, and they are saying that President Biden is completely dug in, that whatever he decides to do, he's going to do it on his own terms. He won't be bullied by members of Congress nor big donors saying that they're not going to support him, that he feels like he's earned the right to make his own decisions, but that he's completely dug in, that he's going to stay in the race. But here's the challenge, is that he set in the campaign to some degree, set an arbitrary sort of bar. And that was that he was going to do all of these interviews and he was going to be out and people were going to see that he's capable and competent and ready to take on the job. But that has not satisfied these members of Congress. And so that's really the question. This will continue to dog him. How does he dispense with this question around whether or not he's ready and prepared, especially given that he's met his own bar? But here's the one thing that he has going for him, and I've been hearing this on the ground from elected officials in states that actually matter, grassroots organizers, and that is the power of the grassroots. They are absolutely pissed off right now, the Democratic Party and these members of Congress. They're feeling like it's not their decision to make, that the delegates have already spoken, that 14 million Democrats have voted for Joe Biden. So how dare they step in and try to take grab democracy, by its neck and determine who's going to be the next president. So that's what I'm hearing, that this grassroots are saying, listen, here's the thing. It's a decision between a guy who talks slow and one who lies fast. We'll take the one with the guy who talks slow.
How should Democrats actually ponder the report in the Washington Post this morning that President Obama, with whom Joe Biden served 8 years as vice president, has in some way or another communicated deep-seated concern about the future of his candidacy?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I think there's a growing chorus among Democratic elites and senior elected officials within the party that's basically saying to the president that he should reconsider his decision to stay in the race. You know, the relationship between Obama and Biden is obviously complicated. Obama told Biden to step down and let Hillary Clinton run, and he actually did that, and Clinton lost. So you can imagine there's some feelings that still exist there. So I just think what I'm hearing, though, is that the grassroots, are hearing these elected officials weigh in, but they're not satisfied with where those members are, and they're feeling like these members, 17, 18 members of Congress should not be determining who the next president is. But I will also add, Major, what I'm hearing from senior staffers on the Hill and from members of Congress is that we should expect more defections next week, that the bleeding hasn't actually stopped. It was sort of paused for the Republican convention. No one wanted to distract from Donald Trump then. But when the members come back next week, that Biden should expect there'll be more defections.
Quickly, Ashley, you can answer this in ways that many people can't. Talk to my audience about the relationship between big dollar donors and grassroots donors. Can a presidential campaign, any presidential campaign, survive only on grassroots donors and a few big donors? And if big donors opt out, does that effectively end your campaign?
It doesn't absolutely effectively end your campaign. I mean, Barack Obama, his share of fundraising was he had a greater share of grassroots fundraising than he did big donors at certain points, and especially during the first race. So it's definitely possible to win the race with grassroots fundraising, and Biden has really exceeded expectation in that area. He's almost doubled what he's raised in the past. He's had in the last week and a half, I think, the highest numbers of grassroots small dollar donors that he's seen yet. And so that really suggests that the party, the very core of the party, not the top of the party, not the elites, not the members of Congress, but the core of the party is still with Joe Biden. And that's encouraging for the campaign.
Those pesky elites, they're seemingly everywhere. Ashley Etienne, thank you so very much. Former President Trump is set to give the keynote address here at the Republican National Convention. How Saturday's assassination attempt on his very life could change what he's planning to say. That's coming up next. You are streaming America Decides.
He did, as you said, rewrite his speech. I don't think you can go through what he went through on Saturday, really a near-death experience, and not come out on the other side impacted. And he, I think, truly was impacted, and I think you will hear that in his speech tonight.
Welcome back to America Decides. As you just heard, former President Donald Trump has told his family and those around him he's significantly rewritten his speech for tonight, accepting the Republican Party's nomination, which I mentioned at the top. We shouldn't overlook this, for a historic 3 consecutive times, first time ever in party's history. I want to be joined here, proud to be joined, by our campaign reporter, Jake Rosen. Jake, you spend a lot of time at Trump rallies. You know the standard former President Trump campaign speech very well, possibly as well as any campaign reporter. What are you expecting that will sound possibly different tonight?
I'm expecting those same through lines on things like immigration, on the economy. But I think the attacks that we've seen on Joe Biden may be mellowed. But at the same time, you know, he's dealing with COVID right now. Does he wish him well and then attack him? Does he not bring him up at all? I don't think you can do that. Does he just go after Harris, or does he just group Democrats together? Or does he not mention all, right? Like the talking about unity and the softer side of Trump, we saw it last night with Donald Trump Jr.'s child talking about the soft side of the grandfather. They already rolled this out kind of last night. I think tonight it's what side of Trump does he go to show the American people, and what does he talk and tell us about the assassination attempt that we don't know so much of from the time he went in the motorcade to the time he stepped off the airplane in Newark?
And would you surprise you, Jake, if there was something in that description of what happened Saturday that would land in a completely unusual Trump column, which would be or sound vulnerable?
You know, I think the way that I've spoken to the campaign, they are vulnerable now. Their staffers who are there have, and this feeling of shock that I think as someone who was there, we all feel. Does he display that tonight, or does he put on the fight, throwing the fist pump up to a raucous crowd reaction when they saw him get lifted up off of the floor in Butler? I think there are 2 versions of Donald Trump. Which one do we see tonight? The fighter that they've consistently shown us since Saturday, that he is a fighter? Or do they scale it back just enough so that Americans can get a view that no one really has gotten yet outside of the immediate family and close Trump circle?
Very quickly, I want the audience to understand, you've never before seen former President Trump or his campaign lean into the grandfather, the kindly grandfather motif. That is brand new here.
Absolutely. And when the campaign staff and the people around Donald Trump tell me about him, they bring that up, but they don't always say it on the air.
Never.
And they don't always tell you in a statement when you're asking for a reaction to a political event. Usually it's written with that bravado of Trump that we are so used to. And I think these days, and especially last night, I thought Donald Trump Jr.'s daughter was just the perfect example for them to roll out before tonight, so that, you know, this is the man who prints out the honor roll of his granddaughter and shows it to friends. This is not the man who's yelling at people, as has been reported by you and others for 9-10 years now, the angry man behind the scenes that Democrats have targeted and some Republicans have come out against for being unfit for office.
Jake Rosen, proud to be with you. Thanks for your help. Ed O'Keefe joins us now. Ed, your thoughts about tonight and its potential impact on this campaign, led by what the former President Trump tells the country?
Well, you know, we've heard from his family the last few days that we should anticipate a softer, more unifying candidate to appear on stage tonight. We've heard this before. Now, in fairness, we haven't had a candidate grazed by a bullet appear just a few days later to accept the nomination and perhaps demonstrate that he's a different man now. But I can recall in the past we've been told, oh, he's, you know, trying to tone it down, or he's changing his focus, or he's, you know, trying to be more of a human candidate and less of this sort of, you know, New York power broker or somebody who's a little more aggressive. So let's just see what that looks like tonight, what themes he tries to strike, and then let's see if it continues tomorrow and beyond. And if that really does start to happen, and he can garner national sympathy, not only from his own party, but maybe those that were on the fence about it or who are looking for a reason to vote for him in the wake of the assassination attempt, then he's off to the races, and he'll continue pulling away, as our CBS News poll tonight suggests he could. But the other thing to keep in mind as we look at this dynamic, there are a lot of Democrats watching tonight who would like to see the current president step out of the race, who believe that a somewhat chaotic, uncharted territory kind of situation in the next few weeks leading into their convention could potentially snatch a lot of the interest and color and enthusiasm and intrigue and news coverage, frankly, away from Republicans, and maybe rejuvenate and revive American interest in the campaign in a way that hasn't existed now for the last 18 months, as people have consistently told us they're no fan of either option that they have right now.
Ed, you've been on the floor every night of this convention. Please let our audience know what you've been hearing on the floor from the delegates, their level of enthusiasm, their level of emotional attachment to this candidate, which they came here liking and admiring. I imagine, based on my conversations, I haven't had as many as you have, that has been, if anything, doubled, maybe even more.
Well, there was a lot of a resolve and emotional concern for him until he emerged Monday night. And ever since, I get a vibe of like, we've got this, right? Like, if we can just keep this going, bottle it up and take it home with us, we may be on the verge of a big win. A quiet confidence maybe. But a lot of the people who attend this, I think it's important for people to remember, they are not the people you see at Trump rallies. They are professional party operative types who have been around a while. I've been struck by the age of these people and how many tell me this is my 5th convention. I've been to 12 of these. I've been coming since 1996 in San Diego. And only now are you beginning to see Trump era and Trump-loving activists and operatives end up in these seats in ways that they maybe weren't there in 2016 and probably will be now in the years to come. And so, yeah, they're interested. They're excited about tonight. They want to see what kind of message he delivers. And I get a sense that there's a real hope that he will strike a unifying, somewhat emotional message, because they know that that's a big barrier for entry to many of their friends and neighbors and colleagues back home who say, look, I'd love to have all these things he wants to do, but he's a mean guy. He's got all these other legal problems. I just can't do it. Maybe something tonight gives him a reason to think I can do it. We'll see.
Maybe indeed. Ed O'Keefe, as always, thank you so very much.
In that moment, my father didn't just show his character. He showed America's character.
How will the assassination attempt on former President Trump's life change, if at all, the way people view former President Trump? How tonight's speech at the RNC could show, possibly, you just heard Ed O'Keefe talk about this, a different side of someone we all come to know since basically 2015 when he announced his foray into national politics, Donald Trump. That's next. You're streaming America Decides. Hello there. Welcome back to America Decides from the Republican National Convention, Fiserv Forum right here in downtown Milwaukee. If you've been watching this week, you've seen many of former President Trump's presidential rivals gather here to support his nomination. One of them, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. Matter of fact, he addressed this convention, and let's take a quick listen to what Doug Burgum had to tell the delegates.
Serving as a governor with President Trump was like having a beautiful breeze at our back. He cut taxes and he cut red tape. Serving as a governor under Joe Biden has been like a gale force wind in our face. Biden's war on energy hurts every American because the cost of energy is in everything we use or touch every day.
Lance Trover joins me now. He was a spokesperson for Governor Burgum in his 2024 presidential campaign. Lance, great to see you. Thanks so much for being with us. Tell us what it was like for a campaign to go up against what can only be described in Republican circles as the political buzzsaw of a Donald Trump presidential campaign?
Yeah, for Doug Burgum, it was not about needing a job. It was not about seeking a cabinet position or even running to being vice president. For him, he had a set of issues, which you heard him talk about last night: economy, energy, and national security. He just thinks the country is on completely the right track. That's why he ran for president. And look, yeah, it was unsuccessful, as unsuccessful for a lot of folks out there. But he just wants to change the country and get it on a different trajectory. That's why he endorsed Donald Trump. I think he was a terrific surrogate the last several months for Donald Trump. And I think he will be a terrific surrogate for Donald Trump going forward. And we saw that play out. I mean, to be in the final stages of being considered for vice president, that's quite an honor. I mean, a year ago, a lot of reporters were saying Doug who, and that's not the case here at this convention this week.
Likely that he will serve in a Trump administration should there be a second one?
Well, it's obviously up to the president. I think what Doug is focused on when I've talked to him is getting Trump elected. That's his number one focus. It's what he's told me for 6 months. I think for him, it's running through the tape and getting the president elected. And I think at that point, it's up to the president and something I think he would consider.
Brand new CBS News poll, 5 p.m. Eastern this evening. Nationally, Trump 52, Biden 47. Your reaction?
Well, I think the question is Joe Biden going to still be the candidate?
What's your gut?
But I think that is the Democrats are obviously in a doom loop right now, and they're all over the map at this point. I think it remains to be seen. It's a big question, but it is quite the contrast of what we've seen here this week and what we will see here tonight, I think, from Donald Trump talking about unity and the unity we've seen this week versus the doom loop that they are in over there and the just straight up disaster that's going on. It's really quite the contrast for the American people this week.
Sketch out what you think Republicans would say if Kamala Harris were somehow to become the nominee of the Democratic Party.
I don't think it makes a big difference. I mean, she's been Joe Biden's number 2. At the end of the day, the fundamentals of this race are still going to be the same. What are you going to do about cost of living? What about the open border? These are all issues that have dogged Joe Biden for the last year, 2, 3 years. And I think she's been his number 2. I think the Republicans will prosecute the same case pretty much against her that they would of Joe Biden. So I'm not sure there's going to be a huge difference.
Is there a vulnerable side to former President Trump?
I'm sorry.
A vulnerable side, because we're told to anticipate seeing or listening for something tonight that might communicate a kind of newfound vulnerability after what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania on Saturday.
I certainly don't know what it's like to go through what he went through on Saturday. It's got to be life-changing for anybody, no matter who they are in this country. I would suspect tonight that you will hear him talk about unity, talk about strength, and talk about leadership. But I don't think that means you don't prosecute the case against your opponent. I'm sure he will still do that with the issues that we talked about. It might just be a different tone than we're used to from President Trump.
I want to pick on this unity thing for just a second, because lots of people are welcome here. But no Republican who voted to impeach former President Trump is welcome here. No one who voted or spoke out about the 2020 election and the untruths, the lies that former President Trump told about that is welcome here. You have to be on board with former President Trump's assessment, wrong though it may be, wrong though it is about the 2020 election, to be fully welcome here. That's an odd kind of unity, is it not?
Look, this is Donald Trump's GOP. And I mean, I think and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think you also look at the polling, it is where the vast majority of the Republicans are. So, I mean, we do have unity here, and I think Republicans as a whole are unified. It's evident here. It's also evident in the polling. He won the primary outright.
J.D. Vance, what does he bring to the ticket from your vantage point, having run around the country and talked to voters for the better part of a year?
I saw a lot of humility out of him last night, which I think was very moving, very moving for people. I also think his background is very, very interesting. Growing up poor, it's quite this contrast. It's really kind of an interesting dynamic. Here's Donald Trump, who grew up a rich guy in New York,
big inheritance, real estate, all the like.
A real estate mogul, picking a young man who literally grew up dirt poor in, as he said, the hollows of Kentucky and living in Ohio and going through what he went through to join the Marines and to go on and be successful in business and then get elected to the United States Senate. It's really an American success story. I think that's a story that's going to play really, really well with voters out there. And I also think the age factor kind of plays in here a little bit. Certainly if Joe Biden is going to be on the ticket. And look, Donald Trump's 76, 77 years old. Age will be a factor. I think it was a strategic part and a strategic play and a smart one on their part to get a guy who's 39 years old with a young family. I think that plays really well.
Vance Trover, thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate it. Next, I'm going to be joined by another of my CBS colleagues who has seen many, many Trump speeches, seen them in person. what the Trump-Vance ticket has planned after the convention wraps up. That's next, right here on America Decides.
A lot of people have put my grandpa through hell, and he's still standing. He's very caring and loving. He truly wants the best for this country, and he will fight every single day to make America great again.
That was Kai Trump, granddaughter of former President Trump, and I'm told a really good golfer, addressing the Republican National Convention last night. I want to bring in our Olivia Rinaldi, who's one of our campaign reporters, covers many, many, many Trump campaign rallies. Olivia, proud to be here with you. I understand you have some insight into what's going to happen after this convention closes this evening. Rallies to come. Where?
The Trump campaign is planning a full-on sprint for J.D. Vance. We have a few reportable rallies that are going to be happening. Number one on Saturday, Grand Rapids, Michigan. This is key. This is a very big area for Donald Trump to win in 2024. They're bringing along J.D. Vance. It's his first official Trump rally as the nominee. And it's also key because it's Trump's first time back in the arena after what happened last Saturday. So that's a key rally that I'll be watching. But also the following Monday, J.D. Vance will be holding a hometown rally as part of the campaign in Middletown, Ohio. It'll be at a high school there. And this is really his, his first solo gig. So we'll have to see how he responds and how he handles that MAGA crowd. I've seen him before in New Hampshire. And when I was there, I did notice a lot of people were bringing up his book to him to sign. It's kind of like a Bible to them, like kind of a roadmap for how a lot of disenfranchised young men, white voters, are feeling about perhaps some of the economic conditions.
And just a quick geography lesson, Middletown, Ohio is not Appalachia, it's suburban Cincinnati.
Yes, it's closer to Dayton, if you kind of know that Ohio area very well.
He has experience in Appalachia.
Yes.
That's what Hillbilly Elegy is all about, but
his roots were from there. His grandparents are from there, and they raised him. I mean, he has a compelling life story where his mother fell into addiction, so he was really raised by his Mama and Papa, as we've come to know them and come to meet them here at the RNC. And their roots are in Appalachia. So because of that, he really feels a strong connection to that section of the country.
In your conversations today, what was the Trump Inner Circle assessment of Vance's speech last night?
They liked it. They felt like he really spoke to the fact that he's reaching out to the blue wall, as we talk about it, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, the people where jobs have eroded, good union jobs have eroded, the middle class has eroded, felt that he could really speak to how they were feeling about their economic conditions and giving them hope. That was the important part. That's the point of all of this. J.D. Vance is trying to show them that, look, I was able to pick myself up by the bootstraps, go on and look what I've gone to do with my life. We want to make this better for the American working class. That's the whole point of this for them. They felt like he achieved that last night.
And a sense that the stump speech that J.D. Vance will carry to that first rally, that first solo rally on Monday, will probably be an edited version, a cut-down version. Last night dragged a little bit at times, did it not?
It's your first time on stage, and it's hard. I think he...
They even concede that, do they not?
Right, I do. He was engaging with the crowd a lot at one point. You got the Ohio versus Michigan fans kind of battling it out there on the floor as he was calling out his Ohio home team and saying, but, don't get too cute. We do still have to win Michigan, which is key to all of this. But yeah, we do expect that his speech going forward is going to be kind of what we heard last night, perhaps some tweaks, perhaps some more of that MAGA firebrand that we see Donald Trump give. But for the most part, looks like we got a glimpse of what we're going to be hearing for the next 3 months.
More tweaks, more fire.
Yes.
Olivia Rinaldi, thanks so very much.